there's a lot of people playing the game. I don't want to play the game. I don't want to. Strategy is, okay, how do we do it? What is within alignment? Are we willing to do this? Are we willing to do this? It's really easy to lose yourself when you're guesting on a podcast and they're saying these nice things about you, or you're just doing so many episodes where there's like no time in between to remember who you are. It's really easy to lose track of who you are. And I don't ever want that to happen. What's best for you and what's best for business oftentimes are very different things. I think the goal is to try to align them where they're becoming more and more and more similar. I think that's the ultimate goal. That's really what we're talking about today, is we're talking about how do you do the thing that you want to do in an aligned way. We have to figure out, what strategy are you willing to practice? What are you going to be most fulfilled doing? Podcast Growth Nation, welcome back to another episode of Podcast Growth University, where we talk all things podcasting all the time. Today, for episode number 132, the balance of strategy and fulfillment. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode, Rebranding 101. I probably should have done a better job of knowing it was going to be the first episode of the new year and done a new year episode. And then I was thinking I was going to do that for this episode, but I really want to talk about this today, and it actually goes very much in hand with what we're going to talk about. So what does this mean? The balance of strategy and fulfillment. A lot has changed since I started podcasting in 2017. Not just in the industry, not just in social media, not just in technology, but in my approach as a podcaster. So you've heard me talk before about ideal versus realistic. And today's episode is kind of like that, but in a very different way. So here's the thing. In the beginning, when I started doing solo episodes for this podcast, I would write out my hook, and I would write out my story, and I would write out my lesson, and I would write all that out. And then I would do the episode that way. And eventually it got to the place where I said, I don't know if I really like doing it this way. I'd rather do my research, maybe make bullet points if I need them, but I don't want to script it out that way. That's not how I started this. That's not how I enjoy doing it. I kind of would rather do it a way that I enjoy more, even if it's not what everybody else is doing or it's not the quote-unquote right way to do it. I kind of want to do it my way. And that's what I'm talking about in today's episode. The balance of strategy and fulfillment. Strategically, should I have done an episode on the 5 things you need to do this year to make your podcast a top 100 podcast? Sure. I probably should have. Do I want to do that right now? Not really. No, because then it's more of a performance than it is fulfilling. Now, I'm not saying it's not a performance. I'm not saying that maybe I don't try to bring as much energy as I can. I think that's kind of par for the course. But I think a lot of us get lost in doing quote-unquote what we're supposed to do at the expense of what we want to do. Now, there's a fine line, right? You can't just do what you want to do, and maybe I only feel like talking about microphones for every single episode. This isn't going to be a very good podcast for podcasters unless they're having microphone or audio issues. Yes, so there's a fine line in this. But I don't want to have hooks that are lies. I don't want the thumbnails to be lies. I don't want the cold open of the episodes to be like a lot of these podcasts where they are just super hooky and they're saying stuff that just isn't real. And then when you get 2 hours into the podcast, you realize it was edited together and it just kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth. I think one of the reasons people quit is they get so caught up in doing what they're supposed to do and doing what other people are doing that they fall out of love with the art of podcasting. People are always very surprised when I tell them that for NLU, we don't have guests anymore and we haven't had guests in years. And it's not because we couldn't get good guests. We had some very, very big guests on. Very, very big, especially in our space. But eventually it got to the place where I wanted to make sure that the value that was being given to the audience was accurate and it was aligned. And right now is a weird time in podcasting where a lot of these big shows are having guests on that are saying stuff that just, I won't say it isn't factually true, but sometimes it's on the fringes of what is factual and what is opinion. And that's what gets promoted about the episode, and those are the social media clips that get used, and it's this weird thing. Are you supposed to have guests on and then do it that way? I mean, in the beginning, that's kind of how it went. And that's a really good strategy if you want to do it that way. But for me, it wasn't fulfilling. It wasn't fulfilling getting to the end of an episode and saying, do we do the audience a disservice? Or will we do the audience a disservice by releasing that episode? Because what that person said, we know is factually incorrect. And we had several podcasts that never saw the light of day because of that. I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm not saying you have to hold that responsibility. Honestly, I think it probably is the best bet. I mean, it's your show after all, but that's up to you. That's more an opinion than a fact. But we moved away from that. So we're not doing that anymore. There's a lot of other things. Like, I don't do Instagram lives. I know you're supposed to do those. I don't want to do them. I'd rather podcast. I'd rather do something else. I'd rather do something that's more fulfilling and makes more sense. There's a lot of things I should be doing that I'm not necessarily doing. So that was kind of my goal when I sat down and said, all right, what do I want to talk about today? There's a lot of strategy, right? Of course. This episode is titled Away because of strategy. But also, I don't want it to be a lie. For me, that's not aligned. That's really what we're talking about today, is we're talking about how do you do the thing that you want to do in an aligned way. The reason I don't ever want to have ads or ever have sponsorships or ever anything like that is if you follow what's happening on YouTube, a lot of the people that have promoted these really big companies, it comes to light that these companies are frauds. So AG1 is a really good example. And again, this is hypothetical. I'm not allegedly, I don't know. I haven't done all the research. But AG1 is this athletic greens company that charges a lot of money for their athletic greens. They were just, everybody and their mother on YouTube, the big YouTube channels were sponsoring them. And then it came out that these things really weren't worth the amount of money and they didn't really help that much. And a lot of the claims that were made weren't true. There's another big one right now that's happening with a website plugin called Honey that PayPal owes. It's this coupon plugin that was supposed to help you save money, and come to find out, almost, I won't say the whole thing was a fraud, but there's videos on it. So if you just Google Honey, Google or YouTube Honey and see what happens, it'll make a lot of sense. That's one of the reasons I didn't want to do sponsorships or ads. Because I think people are really thinking about the money over other stuff. They're not thinking about their audience. I'm not saying all of them, but I didn't want to go that way. But that's the way that we were told to do it in the beginning. What do you mean you're not going to do ads? What do you mean you're not going to do sponsorships? What do you mean I don't want to. I don't want to do it that way. That's not the way I want to do it. That's not a line for me. It's not fulfilled. Saying no to certain guests that most other people would have had, it wasn't a line. I want this episode to be an episode where you're able to give yourself permission to do things the way that you want to do them, / also accept the upsides and downsides of that. I just got off a podcast breakthrough session, and this person said, well, I run my own business. I only want to work 20 hours a week, right? Sometimes I don't even want to work 20 hours a week. Okay. As long as you're okay with understanding that you're most likely never going to have a massive podcast, only working 20 hours a week where you are with the financial resources you have, the expertise you have, the credibility you have, it's most likely never going to be a big podcast. It doesn't mean it can't serve your purposes, right? But it's most likely not going to be a top 100 podcast anytime soon / ever. Are you okay with that? Because if you're okay with that, that's fine. Who am I to tell you that you should work more if you're okay with the results that you get with the amount of work you're putting in? I want different things than this person, so my day-to-day is going to look different than this person. Totally fine. It's probably the same for you. Maybe you want different things than the people around you. Your life looks different than theirs does. This person is essentially saying, I don't want to play the game. I want to do what I want to do. That's fine, as long as you're okay with the results. Here's the truth. Us not having guests for Next Level University is a mistake. It's not ideal for growth. It is not the best strategy for growth. But I don't care. I don't care. I'm okay with doing this for a lot longer with less results, whatever. I want to be in alignment. I mean, you've probably experienced it. You've gotten off a podcast and felt dirty because of the guest you had on. Maybe you haven't, and if not, I hope that never happens. But we've had that happen. We've had amazing guests. This is the exception, not the rule. But I could see where it was going. I could see where the guesting thing was going. And I'm telling you, YouTube is a really good example. These really big podcasts that have people on that there's no fact-checking happening. Joe Rogan's a good example. He has a lot of fringe people on that talk about fringe topics. I'm not going to speak on any of that. Whatever. Joe Rogan can do what he wants. It's his own platform. But there are a lot of things that get said that might not be true, and who's to be held responsible for that? I think it's probably the host. It's the host more than anybody. The host is the one who's supposed to do the research. But that's the way that people are doing this, is they're trying to get big guests on, and they're trying to get them to say controversial stuff, and it becomes this whole thing. Now, I don't want this entire episode to be about that. That's not the goal. The goal is we have to figure out what strategy are you willing to practice, and then what are you going to be most fulfilled doing?
I just wanted to take a quick second and give a shout out and a huge thank you to Next Level Podcasting Solutions, Kevin and his team. They have been incredible to work with, very flexible, on the spot with any questions that I have or any concerns that I have. When I first started out my podcast, I was doing everything on my own. I have no editing background. I have no podcasting background. I knew nothing about it. And so I was bootstrapping all of this myself while I was still trying to take on my role as a full-time mom. And once I met up with Kevin and we had these discussions and I got on board with adding an editing team, oh my goodness, it just lifted this weight off of me. It lifted my time that I was spending doing my editing. And in the beginning, full transparency, when I was editing just my individual recordings, it was a little more manageable, not super manageable. And then when I started doing my interviews for the podcast, it was hours upon hours of me doing the editing that didn't include any of the promotional material that I am now getting from Kevin and his team. It wouldn't have been sustainable. I would not have been able to keep up with that. So I recommend Kevin and his team. They have done wonderful work in helping me grow my podcast. I have really enjoyed working with the editing team, and it definitely feels like more of a team environment versus me hiring them to do a specific job. I mean, we all work collaboratively on the projects that I have, and I have these crazy ideas sometimes, and they come up with a solution to fit my needs. I can't recommend them enough. I really enjoyed working with them. Kevin and the Next Level Podcasting Solutions, thank you so much for the work that you have done in the past and are continuing to do for me. I'm growing this community and growing this platform with a beautiful team that is working for me and with me to see my vision and help that come to life. So thank you again so much. I really appreciate you guys.
I have clients that charge money for people to come on their podcasts. For me, that was never aligned. Just like I will not pay to go on a podcast. Alan went on a podcast pre-call last week, and they get to the end of the call, and the person says, oh yeah, I forgot to mention it's $2,000 to come on the podcast. But we have millions and millions of views. They don't. I know they don't. Because I've been pitched that a bunch of times, and we're on this television station and all. That's not real. Most of that is not real. But they're playing the game. There's a lot of people playing the game. I don't want to play the game. I don't want to. Have we played the game in the past? I would say statistically much, much less than other people. But yeah, we had certain guests on because we thought certain guests were going to be high hitters. Yes, I've played the game for sure. And then eventually it got to the place where I didn't want to do that anymore. I don't want to script every episode. That's just not how I want to do it. And I just don't think that's best long term. So that's my goal in today's episode, is just to throw out the possibility that you can give yourself permission to do things in a different way that feels more aligned. Maybe this is a weird episode. I don't know. Because I had that moment recently where I look at what the other podcasts about podcasts are saying. And for me, I don't really want to do episodes on that. That's not who I am. I want to do episodes the way that I've been doing episodes. Now, that doesn't mean I don't want to improve, and it doesn't mean I don't want feedback, and it doesn't mean I don't want to add more value. I want all of those things. But I want to do it in my own unique way. I think after recording over 3,000 episodes, I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is it's really easy to lose yourself when you're always in front of other people. It's really easy to lose yourself when you're guesting on a podcast and they're saying these nice things about you, or you're just doing so many episodes where there's like no time in between to remember who you are. It's really easy to lose track of who you are. And I don't ever want that to happen. I've had bouts of that for sure. I've had bouts of that where I thought I had to be other people. I don't want to do that. So there are games that are played. And it just depends on, well, how do you want to play the game? Is there a better strategy for you that's more in alignment with who you want to be? Is there a better strategy for you that's more in alignment with the results that you want? And there's a lot of ways you can do it, right? This is a good example of potentially playing the game. And again, this isn't a bad thing. Let's say you're someone listening right now who has some extra income. You're doing well at your job. You have money. You have enough money to cover your bills, then some. You can invest in the podcast. Cool. Reach out to an author that you really, really resonate with and tell them you will buy 50 of their books at whatever the author cost is. Let's say it costs $5. I will buy 50 books at author cost and I will give them away to my audience. That guest may very well come on because that's something completely different. If they want to sell their book, that's in direct alignment with what they want. And most people aren't willing to do that. Most people aren't willing to invest money like that for their podcast. That's an example of potentially playing the game. I think that's a really positive way to do it, right? More than anything. So here's an example of playing the game. When people were doing like the TikTok dancing and all that stuff, some people were doing that. For me, that's not who I want to be. I don't want to jump on trends like that. Again, is that what's best for growth? No, I'm not saying it is. But I do believe it's what's best for alignment. What's best for you and what's best for business oftentimes are very different things. I think the goal is to try to align them where they're becoming more and more and more similar. I think that's the ultimate goal. But there's just a lot of examples of this, right? Using different thumbnails that just aren't true, using cold opens and hooks that just aren't true, only choosing the most controversial piece of an interview to put on social media, lying about numbers, buying ads. Not buying ads, sorry. I'm all for buying ads. If you got the money to buy ads, do it. Buying followers, buying reviews, buying comments. This is way more common than you think. I went on a podcast recently, and I always try to follow the person after so I can build a relationship with them and add value. And when they tag me in the stuff that they share, I can share it back if they're following me, all that happy jazz. And they did a post that said, thank you so much for 10,000 followers. And they're paid for. You can tell by the engagement. There's no engagement. You don't have 10,000 followers and get one like. It doesn't work that way. So this person not only paid for the followers, but then they put together a Canva post that said, thank you so much for the 10,000 followers. That is playing the game to a drastic level. And that just for me is out of alignment. I don't want to do that, right? If you got to cheat to win the game, you should play a different game. You're just not playing the right game. And the fact is, that person's not going to win because they're not doing the fundamentals that would actually help them win. So that's a strategy that a lot of people are doing. And you've heard me talk about those before. That's not fulfilling. I'm convinced one of the reasons I've been able to do as many episodes as I have, one, we were able to make money and monetize this, so I don't have to do a lot of the things that would take up so much time where I wouldn't be able to do the other things, right? Again, we have an amazing team. That's because we were able to turn this into a business and make money. So that's a big piece. I'm privileged in that. And I work really, really hard. But I am privileged in the fact that I'm able to buy back some of my time. That's a big piece of it. But this is also very fulfilling for me. So there's some people who get burnt out after doing 7 episodes. I don't necessarily. I get tired and my voice gets hoarse and I might get exhausted, but I love podcasting. it's more fulfilling for me than maybe it is for somebody else. Just like right now, you might be saying, oh, I could write for 24 hours a day if I had time. You're more fulfilled by writing than I am. I don't like writing. I enjoyed it more than I actually thought I would, but I don't like it as much as I do speaking. That's different. So that's really what I'm talking about. Strategy is, okay, how do we do it? What is within alignment? Are we willing to do this? Are we willing to do this? I'm not saying what pieces of yourself are you willing to sell. I'm not saying that. But I said this to Alan recently. I said it almost seems like you either sell little pieces of your soul or you sell little pieces of your body. And pieces of your body are the grind. And that's what we're doing. We're very, very solo, siloed, segmented. We don't do a lot of networking. We don't do a lot of collaborating. Again, I'm not saying that's the best strategy, but I do feel like it's the most fulfilling for us. But I also know other people that just network their way to the top and they mislead and they lie and that type of stuff. And obviously there's a middle ground, right? There is a middle ground, but it's about finding what is aligned for you. So that's my goal in today's episode. Yeah, I mean, there's a million ways you could do it. But I think the best way for you to do it is the way that you're going to do it for the longest. The best diet is the one that works and gets you closer to your results. The best exercise regimen is the one that you're willing to do for a long period of time and it gets you closer to your results. I could tell you exactly what I do, but that doesn't mean it's right for you. And that's why I always say, don't do an episode every day. It's probably not the right strategy for you. Is it a good strategy? Yeah, I think it's a great strategy. Not just for putting out content, but for improving as you go. But is it fulfilling? Depends. It's fulfilling for me, but it might not be fulfilling for you. So that's my thought in today's episode. The juggling act, the balance, the realignment of strategy and fulfillment. That is something that I think if you look at in 2025 and you're really, really focused on it, it might extend the length of time that you're able to do the podcast for, so you might be able to get away from doing certain things. I'm not saying you should. I'm not saying you shouldn't. It's just a perspective. I'm looking to create perspective in this episode. And I tell clients this all the time. We don't have guests, and that's a mistake for growth. But it's not a mistake necessarily for business. Because if we were having 7 guests on a week, my schedule would look different. I wouldn't be able to have as many clients. There's a lot of different things that would happen because of that. So what's best for growth isn't always what's best for you. What's best for business isn't always what's best for you. What's best for you isn't always for what's best for business. It's this whole thing. So take from that what you will. I think there's a lot of potential to play the game, but just make sure you're playing the game in the way you want and you're staying in alignment with what you value as a human being. That is what I would say for today's episode. All right. If you have no idea what I was talking about at all in this episode and you're looking for some level of clarity, I'll have my link in the show notes for a free 30-minute podcast breakthrough session. I just want to add value. Again, I'm not going to sell you on anything. It's not a sales call. I just want to add value. And even that's something that I've gotten feedback from other people of, well, just treat those like sales calls. I don't want to. I don't want to tell somebody it's not a sales call and then them log on and then me try to sell them something. That's not aligned. That would be me playing the game. It's totally free, no strings attached, and then 3 minutes into the call, I say, okay, cool. So what would I have to do today to make us work together? I don't want to do that. If you ask me pricing, I'm happy to share all that. Awesome. But for me, I don't want to play the game that way. So yeah, no strings attached. Bring all the questions you got. I'm not going to try to sell you anything. I promise. And my only goal in there is to add value. So that's my goal. We have Podcast Growth Nation. We'll have the link in the show notes, a podcast group on Facebook that's filled with like-minded podcasters like you who want to grow and scale and make money and grow their business and get better at podcasting and all that stuff. Always there to answer questions. I try to post in there. So in 2025, my goal will be to post in there every single week every single day, and then do one live per week. So I want to be in there a lot. I want a lot of content to come from there. And then there's a lot of things that we're going to be doing, as I've kind of alluded to, in terms of the way we do this show and the video and all that stuff. So we'll see some changes coming up in the very near future. But yeah, all that. I appreciate you all so very much because this has been the most successful year of this podcast. And again, that's all because of you. Really, if you think about it, I only did 2 guest interviews this year. 1 technically, that was 2 episodes with Evan. I didn't do a ton of social media content, right? All the podcasts I went on, I didn't really talk about this podcast that much because I was really focused on adding value to their audience, and a lot of their audience isn't podcasters. So it's because of you. You tune in every week and you keep coming back, and hopefully you're telling people that are podcasters, and you're trying to help other people grow their podcasts, and you're trying to keep them going when the times get rough. So I appreciate you for helping other podcasters as well. And if this episode helped you, please share it with somebody that is a podcaster that you think would find value in it. That would mean the world to me very much. All right. I hope 2024 was the most successful year of your podcast life. I hope a lot of the goals that you set at the beginning have come true, and or you learned the lessons necessary to make them come true in 2025. And I hope that you're ready to go for 2025. I hope that you have some goals set. I can help you with that. Shoot me questions if you need help setting goals. But I hope you have your goals set, you have your habits set up, and you're ready to get the ball rolling, because 2025 is here, and there's a lot of opportunity. So I hope you are able to capture that. Until next week, keep on crushing it, keep on podcasting, and I will talk to you all then.